The elevator speech, I'm Mike Gorman. I'm an educational leader, currently the president of Your Salem Community College. Been in the field of education for more than 40 years and have done everything from being a teacher and a coach to now being a college president. That's it. That's me in a nutshell. If I want to make it a walnut rather than a peanut, then I say I am married, 2 kids, 3 grandkids, live here in town, been part of Salem County since 1981. Okay? Now, if I need to get a little bit longer, I start getting into other ventures that I've been, specifically a president, a superintendent, a principal, and so forth, to try and broaden the context of things. But you should be able to tell somebody who you are, what you are, 30 seconds. You've got from the first floor to the 3rd floor to get your message across to somebody. We'll spend, maybe next year, a whole session on your elevator speech and your talking points about yourself and your business. Because that's really all you get. One shot to be able to make that first impression and sway somebody some direction. So, some of the side things that I've done, I always get a kick out of this. I was an entrepreneurial landscaper. I mowed lawns, okay? I was 17 years old, had my own lawn mowing business, much like Jim Thorpe has here, only look at what Jim Thorpe did with it. I didn't, you know, I just mowed some lawns for a couple of summers, but it was my own business with great experience. I've been a bank courier. You want to talk about feeling important. I was just carrying paper. I really didn't have any money, but I'd have to go to the the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia, and I'd have to turn in these boxes of receipts and all this kind of stuff. Made me feel important, and I can tell people I was a bank courier. Makes you sound like you were something. I got a little dirt under the fingernails. I was a farm worker at one point in time. I didn't, work cornfields or anything like that. I worked for the Medford Nursery. We made trees and plants and bushes and things like that. But it was brutal, it was considered farm work, and I got a better understanding of living off the land, so to speak. I hated it. I'm glad I don't, all of my farming is done at Acme. I don't have to worry about any of it. Thank God somebody else does. And I was a factory worker for a period of time, along with a host of other jobs. But the factory worker, some of you may have seen it, it's in Camden, it's called Super Tire Engineering Company. And we retreaded tires. And if you want to talk about the worst job, it made me value getting an education. So I've had a broad spectrum of experiences. I've been really very lucky in my life, and part of that is just having a sense of self. Okay, so today what we're going to do, you're going to know your why, hopefully distinguish between leading and managing, both critically important events to have taking place, but they are very distinct events. We'll show you a universal business model that you can implement in just about any way that you wish. A framework for organizing meetings. Again, that's something I think we should return to at another time to really expound upon, because we can get into much greater detail. My favorite, avoiding the ladders of inference. We all do it, we're all guilty, and we have to be able to refrain from it. Defining a problem statement, this is the one that's going to scare you. And then identifying your priorities, your focus, and most of all, the one thing that is important to you. So, with that being said, do you know your why?
The series is called How Do I Know? And a lot of times when people hear the phrase, how do I know, the next thing they say is what? How do I know what? But the key really isn't to know what, the key is to know why. Because when you know your why, you have options on what your what can be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is stand-up comedy. My what is writing books. My what can be going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that has moved me towards my why is a web series that we have out now called Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. So 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm about to show you a clip to. We were in Winston-Salem. So Break Time, this is how it works. I travel the country, I do stand-up comedy, probably an hour, hour and a half at an event. And in the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy, and he said that he teaches music at a school. I was like, all right, you teach music, can you sing? And then I'm just going to show you the clip. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Right now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
So here's the thing. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what has more impact because you're walking in or towards your purpose.
Quick exercise. You're going to get 60 seconds. What's your why? Why do you do what you currently do? Very simply, my why is that I believe learning and education is the silver bullet that cures every problem on the planet. That's why I do what I do. Plain and simple. Why is the secret to it all? And we're going to circle back to why throughout, because it's the most important question you can ask in any framework. Doesn't look like it now, but believe it or not, 45 years ago, I played college football. And we had to get up during summer training camp, which is the worst experience that mankind has created for athletes. It's just horrible. They get you up at 5 in the morning, and at 5:30, you have to go out, and our coach had us running 1.5 miles. At 5:30 on a blistering August morning. And my junior year, I transferred into Widener College, now Widener University, and I was not accustomed to their routine. It was different than what I had in my previous school. So I get up with everybody else. I trudge out to 14th Street. We're swatting at flies and everything else. Everybody's got bad breath, and you're sweating, and it's only 5:30 in the morning. It was a horrible couple of weeks. The temperatures, I don't think, were below 90 at midnight. It was just one of those spells that we get. And we go out there, and we had to run this 1.5 miles. Now, I'm an offensive tackle, and for those of you who don't know, they're usually the big guys that are out there that plod along. Well, I wasn't a particularly big guy, but I was a good plodder. And I got out there with the rest of them, and I thought, I'm going to run this 1.5 miles as fast as I can every morning. So for 3 weeks, I'm out there, and I'm sprinting to try and do this 1.5 miles in 8 minutes. I'm doing it. I'm doing very well. But it's not making me a better football player in my eyes. How many offensive linemen never have to run 1.5 miles? Running backs never have to run 1.5 miles. So going into my senior year, I got the gumption to talk to the coach, and I said, Coach, Why do we get up that early in the day to go run? He said, I'm going to be a coach someday. I'd like to know your theory in back of this. I wanted to know the why without ever realizing it. He said very simply, we want you to bond together as a team, and adversity and adverse circumstances help you bond together as a team. Secondly, there was a study out of the University of Texas that talked about long distance running, limbering up football players in particular before practices and helping to reduce injuries. Third, I just want you to finish this and have something done positive before you have breakfast in the morning. I knew the why. Well, I stopped racing at the 8-minute mile and a half. I didn't have to do that. We were required to finish up within 12 minutes, and I became an official member of the 11:59 Club because now I understood the why. Knowing the why in back of things has critical importance to everything you're going to do. When you're in a dispute with someone, and believe me, I've had a lot of disputes in my life, you have to sit back and say, why are they taking that position? What brought them to that particular place and time? Once you can start asking that why and interpret what's going on in that other person's life, makes it a little bit easier for you to comprehend and deal with, and in such be able to move the mission forward, because that's what we're all about. Everybody in here has a business interest, and you want to make sure you provide a service or a product that customers can't provide for themselves as economically, conveniently, or with the quality that you can provide. Because let's face it, if you're a carpenter, well, a lot of people can hammer nails, cut wood, and whatever, but you want to make sure that you can do it to the point that the customer is satisfied and likes the work you do, and it's worth it to them to pay you to do it. We all do it because how many of you own cars? How many of you fix your own cars? It's usually the minority of people, because we have somebody who has that talent and expertise. But if you really took the time to learn about the internal combustion engine, I'm sure everyone in here would be able to fix cars. So you want to have value, you need to know the why. That's the imperative in back of this. And if anybody wants the clip, it's Michael Jr. He's a stand-up comic. He does incredibly good work and has, I call him a stand-up philosopher more so than a comic, but he's enjoyable, and I advise you to look up his work. The other one you might want to look at on that is Simon Sinek. It's a much longer clip, but he talks about Apple in particular. And just to give you a very, this isn't, I don't think I'm revealing too much, but he goes into Apple was founded upon their why. Apple has built a culture because they all believe in their why. Everybody can make computers. There are dozens of companies out there that make computers. But when you talk to people who are Apple folks, they have a different cultural dedication to the product for different reasons. Because Apple was looking to change lives, they weren't looking to make computers. And that's what we're really grounded in. I love this article from Harvard Business Review in 1977. It contrasted leadership and management. Just to quote a couple of things or paraphrase, managers are problem solvers empowered by design construct to independently, or as a component part, advance the organizational mission in a rational, controlled manner. Managers must possess persistence, tough-mindedness, a work ethic, intelligence, analytic ability, tolerance, and goodwill. Think about managers that you may have to be at times, people that you have to deal with. Is all of that part of the character? I mean, problem solvers. We all like to have that person that walks into the scene and says, okay, you go over here, you take that and empty it there, you go over here, and all of a sudden a calm comes to it. They take care of the here and now. They lock us in. They make sure that things function. Leaders, however, are controlled, focused individuals, sometimes controlling focused individuals, who exercise power, influence, and authority within and outside the organization to maintain and advance a vision which is The manifestation of the organizational mission. That's kind of cumbersome. But the fact is, the leader's thinking about where you're going to be tomorrow. The manager's figuring how you get through today. You get down to the simplicity of it. We all need to have managers. Don't ever minimize the value of managing. But if you don't have leading incorporated in there, we call it inculcated, but if you don't have it, then there is no tomorrow. It's wonderful to take care of today. One of my colleagues always uses the quote, "We're going to make the best typewriters on the planet." Well, nobody needs a typewriter anymore. You can make the best of something, but if you don't have that leadership vision for what's going to be the next best thing, then you just end up building something that doesn't really have any value to us as a society or a culture. This is the part I like. Managers focus on objectives. What do we have to get done in order to get to this next level? What's the today issue to get to the tomorrow issue? Leaders focus on broad goals. They think in terms of, where do I want to be down the road? Where do I want to be a year from now? And how do I backfill a game plan in order to get there? So if you're sitting here, you're thinking in terms of, what do I have to get done today? Instead of listening to this guy, I should be back at the office getting some of that stuff off of my desk. I understand it. I got stuff I'd like to get off of my desk. Same thing goes for all of us. However, if you start thinking about, where do I want to be a year from now, 5 years from now, whatever your limit may be, then you start to backfill it. Today's task will fit into that, but you have to be thinking about what it looks like tomorrow. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People goes into that with start with the end in mind. And you really have to be looking at that from a leadership perspective to be able to backfill and map out the journey forward. Managers align and limit variables and options, minimizing risk. This is really good. This is important. When you're in a managerial mode, you're trying to figure out how few things can go wrong today. Okay? When I was a superintendent of schools, I had a lot of managerial tasks that I had to address. The biggest one is snow. We've all been kids. We all know the exhilaration of a snow day, okay? And we all know the frustration of the non-snow day, where I always refer to John Bellaris as, kind of the poster child for forecasts gone wrong. He predicted the storm of the century. Philadelphia closed its schools, everybody closed, and we didn't even get a flake the next day. So those things can happen. But the fact of the matter is, when I have to be responsible, and I'm responsible here, but it's very different. But when I had to close schools or think about closing schools, I didn't sleep. I paced the floor most of the night. I'd be looking outside. Okay, is it snowing yet? Whatever. And I'd be talking to police. I'd be watching the weather forecast. I was in pure managerial mode. What do I have to do to manage today? Once I made that decision, say it was to close, now I have to be thinking about tomorrow, because now I've automatically tacked on another day at the end of the year. However, we need to be able to structure the end of the year. That just took us from ending on a Friday to opening on a Monday. What's going to happen to my attendance with that lone Monday out there? Well, it's going to be low. And I'm just talking about teachers. The whole thing changes. You've got to then be thinking out there. So when I'm looking at this snowflake, I'm thinking, okay, what's the impact for that extra day of instruction for the students that I'm responsible for? Because it's going to be worthless at the end of the year. And we've all gone through school. We all know anything that happens after Memorial Day is really a waste of time, other than taking the exams. It is. We all know that. I hate to admit it, but we all know it. So with that being said, leadership, you have that situation, you're thinking, what is it going to look like down the road? What's this decision going to do? Managerial, how do I get out of this today? And sometimes you have to manage the situation because it is so immediate. Managers work within a construct because usually a manager is not the head of the company. So they have rules to work within. Leaders, hopefully, are at the head of the company. They make up the rules to some degree. I have the privilege of being a leader of this organization. I have certain structures I have to work within, but I get to push a lot of those limits. And there are people in here that tell you I've probably pushed a few of them further than maybe I'm allowed to. But the fact of the matter is, that's the leadership part of it. You want to push it so it comes to the edge of breaking. That's the secret. All too often you learn that you broke it, and that brings you back. Here's the one I like the best is managers answer questions, leaders ask questions. When you're in a leadership capacity, your job is to make sure that other people do what they are supposed to do to make the organization healthier. You only do that by asking questions. And that's why I go back to the why. When you keep asking people why they are doing something that may be taking them down a pathway you didn't want, you ask them why, and maybe you're going to sit there and say, my God, why didn't we think of that? Or you may correct them and say, hey, your why is off the reservation. We need you coming back this way because this is our why. And everybody needs to have a mission. Then you go to Harvard Business Review 2013. And they started to differentiate some of those responsibilities. Leaders are much more involved with people and building consensus. You don't sit in the ivory tower anymore. Today's leader has to get their hands dirty, has to be involved, has to build credibility with the rank and file. Think about it for a second. If you're in charge of an organization and people don't think you know how to do whatever it is that you folks do, I'll use the banking industry for a moment. If you can't believe that the people in charge know how to take care of the exchange of a deposit, and you're probably thinking that this organization's on shaky ground. If you're in construction and you look at the president of the company and you don't think they understand the fundamentals of carpentry and construction, the company's in trouble. So you have to know your business. And that's where leaders have gotten a lot more into dealing with the people, the rank and file. Managers have been moved a lot more into future thinking, doing work in forecasting, budgeting, being empowered to do some things that they weren't earlier. Managers are living more in the vision, but they keep the mission on track. The manager's job is to make sure we stay the course, that we go in the direction that's going to be best for the company. Leaders remain truer to the mission, but they push the envelope with the vision. And everybody likes to say push the envelope. And I got to tell you, I never liked the expression push the envelope. I just like to break the boundary. You know? Move to another level. Whatever it is you're doing, you know how you'd like to break it and go to another level with it. Someday you're going to have the opportunity. Leaders provide empowerment because they have the authority to do so. Managers are exercising empowerment. Organizations within organizations. This is the one that we lose sight of in terms of leadership. You all have a company that you're working within. You know who's in charge. But then you know who's really in charge. Who's the informal force behind it. When you're in small companies, it's not quite as visible, but we've all worked in larger ones. And you know the informal people who really influence what happens. And influence turns into power. They may not have authority. They may not be able to sign the checks, but they move the organization. So one of the things that's critical is to embrace those people and acknowledge their leadership and use it to help advance whatever your mission is. Getting those people on the inside makes a big difference. We're all prisoners of our own past. Mine happens to be as a school superintendent for 13 years, and working contracts was always a high priority. because you can't have an organization without a contract because it just goes badly. So one of the issues that I had to acknowledge and come to work within is the fact that the leadership on the informal side within that union really had the influence as to how we were going to do. So it was my responsibility to embrace that, as sometimes difficult as it was on both sides. I'm sure the union hierarchy was no more thrilled to see me than I was to see them at different times. But the fact is, there's this informal leadership network. If we don't acknowledge it, we don't advance. So if you think in terms of your company, there is somebody there who is the go-to person for most people. You may be it, I don't know. But there's somebody in that company who is the one that everybody vents to. The one who can say, you know, I think it's going to rain, and all of a sudden everybody goes out and says, and it's sunny right now, but it's going to rain later. They just carry that credibility. So you want to be able to identify and work within that context. Leadership is one of those things, everybody's writing a book on leadership. I think they've all been written already, and now it's a matter of how we juggle them and integrate them and think about it a little bit differently. Managing is something that has been demeaned for too long. Now it's starting to get some entitlement of its own. But if you don't have management, you can't get to leadership. And if you don't have leadership, you don't need management. Really pretty simple. Okay, that's the stuff out of Harvard, and if you ever want to go into the Harvard Business Review, they have a lot of good stuff, but I'd spend my time more in TED Talks on YouTube, because I think you'll get more out of it. This is the universal business model. I don't care what you do. That's the top of the pyramid. If you are in the auto manufacturing business, making cars is what you have. If you're in the insurance business, insuring people, that's what you put at top. If you're in construction, building would be at the top. For us here at the college, we're a learning institution. Academics goes at the top. That's our product. That's our service. That is the only reason that we exist. That's why it's on the top of the triangle. Administration is not a four-letter word. Many people tend to think so because administrators, bosses, supervisors, that whole thing kind of carries a negative context. My father was a postal worker all of his life, and he had the ability to go postal. So, you know, I can tell you some stories, but he was a good man, but he just had this resentment of authority, which I think went back to his days during World War II when he was in the Army and getting bossed around, and he just didn't accept it very well. And he did confess to some stockade time as a result of his not accepting some of that well. But the fact of the matter is, quality control, administration, supervision, however you want to term it, is essential to the organization. If you don't have quality control, then whatever it is you do ain't going to matter. You can make cars, but if you don't make cars that are reliable, look good, safe, well, you're not going to be building cars for very long. So this whole quality control aspect is essential. Operations. I can't build cars if somebody doesn't maintain the assembly line. I can't build cars if somebody doesn't take care of the budgeting. I can't build cars if there isn't somebody that makes sure the lights go on every day. This is the support. Every organization has its support. Here at the college, we're pretty simple. Academics, that's our product. That's what happens in these rooms every day. Administration, that's folks like myself who make sure that we are delivering a good product. Make sure the curriculum's right, make sure that we are overseeing quality of instruction, making sure that we adhere to our mission. Operations. Noah is part of our operations. He makes sure we have the stuff we need to do in order to pull this off. The folks in the maintenance department, they are part of operations. The folks that do the cleaning, they are part of operations. The folks that work the business office, they are part of operations. And I don't care what it is you do. I pulled this out of Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania about 25 years ago. There was some professor had just shown us this, and it was like, oh my God, you could put that everywhere. And the truth of the matter is you can. So what we've done as an organization is we've taken our pyramid, and now when we think about any task that has to happen on campus, where does it fall? Which branch does it belong to? So our Board of Trustees is broken up into these 3 categories. And if you look at your organization this way, you'll always be able to segregate a task and be able to align it in a manner that takes it into somebody's hands. So if you take some time within the company and just look at it from that point of view, everything, you know, pyramid power, whatever, everything is that triangle. I don't care what you do, and it will work. Believe me, I've taken this out to a number of businesses over the years, and all of a sudden everybody starts nodding their head, oh yeah. But having this at the top, what you really do, helps you focus in some things we're going to get to in a moment. Any questions on the organizational chart, as you might want to call it, or the business model? It's simple as it gets. Okay, this is something that's got to be for another day, but just to try and frame it a little bit for you right now, because this is critical in terms of what you're going to be doing later. When you have a meeting, realize before you start what you want it to look like when you're finished. Otherwise, don't have the meeting. If you don't have purpose for the meeting, if you haven't organized such that you know what it should look like when you're done, what you've done is set up a party. Okay? You just want to have some social time with folks, and there's nothing wrong with that. But understand, it's social time, and it's not really a meeting. Excuse me. Think about your frequency of meetings. If anybody ever gets a chance to read the book Rudy, it's by Rudy Giuliani, and I will confess I am not a big Rudy Giuliani fan. However, his book on the organizational structure he brought into his role as mayor of New York City has a lot of merit in it, and I have found it to be a very good guiding force throughout. He had his meetings every day, 7 a.m. breakfast meeting, and he had a 1-hour meeting. That was it. He had all the department heads there, and that was their goal, was to get what's happening today. He felt the city was in crisis. He needed to have contact with everybody each day to know what part of that crisis they were addressing. Okay, fast forward, you know, he did his service to the city. Depending upon who you talk to, it's a much better city than he left it, or it's a much worse city. It really doesn't matter. The fact is, this frequency is something you have to address. Here on campus, we do something every other week. Figuring that there's nothing that can't wait 2 weeks. If it's that important, we'll bring everybody together. But we meet an administrative team every 2 weeks. The senior staff meets every week. We go for about an hour I want to say every Monday, but that doesn't always work out. But at the beginning of the week, we go over it, and it's, what do you got? What are you working on this week? What do you got going on this week that I have to worry about? Do you need help in order to get to what you're addressing this week? Those are the kinds of things that get on the table for those sessions. When you're holding a meeting, got to have an agenda. If you don't have an agenda, again, you're just hosting a party. It's just going to be a social experience. And there's value in that as well. What we try to do is we start out with the positives, because everybody can complain. I have not met a human being capable of not complaining. Everybody can throw the stuff on the table and vent and purge their ire and get it out there and get it off of them and onto you. That's not the goal of the meeting. We always start out with what is excellent here. What happened over the last 2 weeks that was excellent? Bill attends those meetings, and sometimes he's the one that has to put it on the table because taking care of our public relations and outreach, he sees things that are excellent. Right now, Bill, if I had to say for this week what's excellent, what would you point to? That's exactly where I was going. That's excellent. That's the kind of stuff that we like to put on the table to start the meeting. First of all, not everybody in your organization may know what took place this week that's excellent. So that's a way of getting the message out. Hopefully, they'll then have a different posture during that meeting of, you know, we are a pretty good place. If I start the meeting with Bill talking about what's happening at the Glass Center this week with those young people from Ranch Hope, and by the way, Seal is responsible for making that happen with the foundation, so I'm going to give credit where it's due. The fact of the matter is, everybody goes into that meeting with a different frame of reference, talking about success and what we can do rather than failures and what we can't do. Because if you start a meeting out with what's wrong, take out the legal pads. You're just going to start filling them up. When you start out with what's right, you can probably get by with one of these little reporter pads that I like to use. But the fact is, there's a different tenor about things. And that's how we like to start it, and I encourage you to look at that. I always start with a thought for the day. I don't think anybody reads it. It's always on the agenda that I send out to them. But it's a way of getting a subtle message out to people. So you set the tone for that meeting. You need to have your areas of delineation. I mean, who's got what? We organize our meetings by that model that you just saw, academics, administration, operations. And we always go to academics first. When I was in a school district where I had a tough time making the sale, I used to take the font for academics and I made it 18 point. To make the point, that's what we're here for, folks. This is what we do. And that offended the people that were in administration and operations, but you know, folks, that's all right. Sometimes you do offend. We always close out the meetings with what's next. What do we have to be thinking about for the future? And you should always have something left over on the agenda that you can push to the next week, because it gives you some connectivity for what is going on. Personally, if you're the one that's running the meeting, after it's over with, go back to your desk and assess it. I just look at, what did I get out of the meeting? I hopefully walked away with some sense of purpose as a result of it. What do I think everybody else got out of the meeting other than they had to sit there for an hour and drink coffee? And then, what did the meeting do to serve our clients or customers? Here, it's students, so that's a client base. If you look at your meeting in terms of, if you didn't have that meeting, would things still be the same for your students? Or as a result of that meeting, did things get better for your students? If you can't say things got better, then you got to go back and work on why you had the meeting. Going back to the why. Again, if you don't walk away with anything but understanding why from today, I'll consider a success. One of the things that our administrative assistant does is takes notes throughout, and we end up with, we don't do minutes, but we do annotated agendas. All you have to do is have your agenda as an outline, and then just put a couple of syllables next to what happened, and always a name. If something was assigned, make sure the name is in your notes. Otherwise, we get to the next meeting, oh, Jennifer was going to do it. And Jennifer says, no, Mike was supposed to do it. If I can pull up the paper, makes a big difference. And then you always have to address what's undone. The others, what's left undone, reflecting upon what your purpose was in the meeting again. Why did you have the meeting in the first place? Did you address that? And if you didn't address it, what are you going to do to make the next one more valuable? Okay. And then best thing to do is ask other people what they thought of it. On your sheet, I have the ladders of inference, which I love the ladders of inference. I always go the wrong direction on these things. we all leapfrog this thing. Think about any situation that you have been in and the ladders of inference. What are the reality and facts? There are situations where there are facts to be discussed. You know what they are. We interpret them. We go with them. We're all guilty of selected reality. We pick out what works for us. That's just a natural human inclination. But you have to be aware of it. And if you're aware that you're doing it, so I always go back to reality and facts. So yesterday, James Comey testifies. And I really don't care whether you are a Trump fan, a Comey fan, a Clinton fan, or Bernie Sanders fan. Fact of the matter is, when all was said and done yesterday, what were the reality and the facts? The reality is that the former FBI director said he felt threatened in the situation. That's a reality. Even though it's a feeling, it's a reality. That's his reality. That's the statement that's out there. What is the one fact that came from yesterday? The fact was the president was not under investigation when Comey was FBI director. That's a fact that he put on the table. Because that's a binary. It's a yes or no. Either wasn't under investigation or wasn't. Now, there are people that say, I can't tell you that or whatever, but yesterday it was a fact. There was no investigation of the president taking place. Now, you can have all kinds of suppositions as to why. That's where we go to our selected reality. So, from this body, we can pick what we want, depending upon which side of the fence you may reside. You go into, well, this FBI guy, he felt threatened. He's FBI. Why would he feel threatened? I mean, he's got the goods on everybody. He shouldn't feel threatened. Again, that goes into our selected reality. We have to be able to look at this and acknowledge we have made a selection. So, on top of that, we can make an interpreted reality. What I just said, which was leapfrogging a little bit, he's FBI. He shouldn't be scared of anybody. He's got every resource on his side. So that's my interpreted reality. Then we make an assumption. He's telling the truth. He's not telling the truth. We make that judgment based upon other factors than reality and facts. Okay? Then you go to conclusions. We reach conclusion. We say he's a hero or he's a goat. One or the other. Because we selected certain realities, we interpreted it, we made an assumption, we reach a conclusion. Then it can affect our belief system. And that's where we really start to get into trouble, because belief guides action. I always say that language guides thinking, thinking guides beliefs, beliefs guide action. So words do matter, and how you use them, and how you interpret them, and how you guide yourself by them. I pull this up every once in a while to just check myself and see, have I leapfrogged to one of these? It's critical that you understand where you stand on this. Otherwise, you're harmful to the organization, because if you go from here to here and you interpret that reality instead of staying with facts, because sometimes all you can do is deal with what people said and accept it on face value, because you've got nothing to contradict it yet. Okay? I'm going to make Bill the bad guy because he's so easy to pick on these situations. I'm looking for a prized pen off of my desk. It's actually made from a seat in Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium, and somehow it has disappeared. I know Bill was admiring that pen. He was in my office the day it disappeared. What are the facts of that situation? The facts are Bill liked the pen. Facts are Bill was in the office. That's where the facts end. Okay? I can leapfrog to my interpretation. I watched him. He was looking at that pen.
He said the fact is that Bill liked the pen. What if Bill was faking it and saying it?
Well, again, I can only deal with the reality of what's on the surface, what he said. Okay? Yeah, and that's what I find is part of what we where we go to these selected interpretive takes us to an assumption. I don't believe he really meant that. Well, unless you're a trained police officer that looks for the eye twitch technique in whether somebody's lying or not, and I was taught that one years ago. I can't do it. I will tell you that. So feel confident when you're speaking to me. But I was taught it, and I never really did catch on. But it is something with your eye will drift. I believe it's upright, because upright really isn't upright. Your eye will drift when you're groping for an answer to a situation. When you go to the up left, you are drawing upon fact. That's why your eye goes that way, to get to the part of the brain or whatever. When you go to the up right, you are searching for something to use. Again, I really tried to learn it, and I didn't do very well with it. But I have to accept things on what we're told until we have something to refute what we are told. And that's one of the problems that we have in problem solving. We go with these suppositions because we have a feeling on something. That's wonderful, and let that be there, because you have to then be suspect. But now I might ask Bill a few questions about what did he like about the pen. You know, Bill, I really missed that pen. And say, well, okay. Say, what did you like about the pen, Bill? What was the nicest feature about it? And he could say, well, it had this scripto kind of tip on it, and it had a nice wood grain. Then I'll know. And if he just says, well, it was from Yankee Stadium, and you'll be able to push for an answer. But you have to accept that people are telling the truth first. That's hard to do, because sometimes we actually know better. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a principal, I was the subject of some assaults on my house. When I was an assistant principal, I had assaults on my cars, like you wouldn't believe. 22 flat tires in 1 year. But as a principal, every Halloween, I seemed to be the target. You're nodding, you heard. And I would be egged. The house would be egged. Well, one day, I go out there, and I snuck around the side of the house. I saw these guys coming, and here I see a guy with a box of eggs, heaving them at my garage door. And I stopped him. I said, Joe, what do you think you're doing? Nothing. I just saw you throwing eggs at my house. No, you didn't. I said, yes, you did. I saw. Okay. There, I had facts on my side because I had witnessed it. He just said no, and he kept saying no, and I'm thinking, well, where am I getting with this? But unless you have contrary facts, if I had just heard that Joe was the guy throwing eggs at my house, unless I had somebody saying, yeah, I saw him do it, there's nowhere to go on it. You have to just take people on face value unless you have something to contradict it. So this is really critical, and I'd advise you to keep that, cut it out, keep it on your desk somewhere, and sometimes use it as a check. Now this is distressing, but we're going to attack it from a couple of points of view.
Can't they run a car with the pilots and yell at drivers? Oh my God! Oh my God!
Hey, Scott, come on. Come on. There you go.
Oh, this is
Busted his lip.
Oh my God! Look at what you did to him! Oh my God! Oh my
Good work,
God!
guys. Good work. Way to go.
This is horrible.
We just walked along.
Oh my God!
Yeah, the police grabbed the guy.
Jesus!
He's an older doctor. He wouldn't get off the plane.
Oh.
And so they forced him off.
Go home. I have to go home. I have to go home. I have to go home. I don't have to. Just kill me. Just kill me. Kill me. Just kill me. I have to go home. Kill me. Just kill me. Just kill me. Just kill me.
Most people are familiar with that situation. You remember that with United Airlines last winter? Okay, let's go to what you saw. What did you see?
Police officers.
We always have spares. And my handwriting stinks, so that's why I'm not an elementary teacher. And a lot of other reasons. But that's one of them. What else did we see?
I saw terrified passengers.
How did you know they were terrified?
Their body language, expression on their faces, what they were saying.
Doctors was under a lot of stress, the victim.
Victims under stress. What else did we see?
Saw the video and people with their phones out.
What else did we see?
Saw the police dragging the doctor away.
How'd you know he was a doctor?
Well,
Okay? Good point. What are the facts? The facts are what you just saw. Somebody said that on video?
He said he's an older doctor.
Somebody else had. This time.
Appeared to be a doctor.
Okay. Again, what are the facts that we have? We're saying somebody said he was a doctor. We're not saying he was a doctor. The fact is somebody said he was a doctor.
He said he needed to get home, refusing to leave the plane.
You're on a plane, that should be your first thing, you're on an airplane.
That is rather critical.
But could have been a train.
No idea why he was.
It could have been a train. How'd you know it was a plane?
I'm going from body of experience because train seats usually are not aligned in the same way or crammed as tight.
Okay. Well, we know from the facts it wasn't a train. It was a plane.
Yeah.
You first looked.
You could have made that assumption. You're right.
somebody was screaming.
Screaming.
Yeah, he was bleeding and injured.
Problem with those videos, though, you don't see what happened before they started taking it.
True. So you only have this set of facts to deal with. Okay? Now we go to the United Airlines staff meeting that evening, which I'm sure there was, and it's like, oh my God, what just happened? So, you have to think of yourself from different perspectives now. First perspective, pilot. What's my job as a pilot? Fly the plane.
Ensure the safety of your passengers.
Ensure the safety of my passengers. I have to get this aircraft off the ground to its destination and make sure everybody's in one piece and the aircraft is when we arrive. That's my first responsibility. We saw police in there. What's their responsibility? Do what they're told, but there's a reason they get told it. Okay, but we'll put that control. I think that there are a whole host of things that can go with control. Safety,
Well, they protect and serve, I mean, basically.
yeah. So let's put protect in there for a second.
They're also job is to manage it so they don't get out of control. I mean, they can have a riot, but, you know, they could.
Yeah.
They're supposed to get the bad.
Okay, you're the individual who has been dragged off the plane. What is your perspective of all this?
He must have done something.
Well, no, you're him. Okay, you're him. So what are you thinking at this point in time being dragged off of that flight? What did I do? Okay?
Actually, if you're bleeding, you want medical attention, you don't know what you said. You may have heart problems or anything, boost things.
I'll put it all. Okay?
Right.
Okay, now you are an air traffic controller for that airport. And I think it was Charlotte, I don't remember specifically, but you're an air traffic controller responsible for getting these flights in and out on time. What are you thinking as this is all happening?
Frustration.
Why is this happening?
And they probably have to be scrambling to reroute.
Okay, so situations are never as easy as they look. And this is what separates leaders from everybody else. When you look at this film clip, it is a horror that it got to this. There are a lot of whys as to how this took place or why this took place. So let's start with the first why was this gentleman being taken off the plane? We know that from the stories, overbooked. Now, we can deal with what we have read. We know that part of the why that he was being removed was the plane was overbooked. Why was the plane overbooked? Let's just call it SOP. You're right. Okay. Why is that standard operating procedure? If you are the operator of a plane, it costs you the same amount of money to fly it from destination A to destination B if it's half full or if it's completely full. Maybe there's a little bit of a fuel change there, but basically it's costing you the same amount to get that thing in the air and move it regardless of how many passengers you have. Now, do we know on this one why it was overbooked? They needed four seats. They had staff that had to be moved from one airport to another so that they could pick up flights on that other end. Okay? So you have I often ask you to go 5 whys. Ask why 5 times, and then when you reach that bottom, you start working that issue. So from a procedural point of view, and I had this fight with my sister-in-law, she loved it. She still picks on me with it. She said, well, that's just horrible. That never should have happened. A, there's not a person in this room that won't say that should happen. Did I? No, there's Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. But we fought about this because she says that never should have happened. And everybody in the room will agree that never should have happened, right? That's not the way we normally fly the friendly skies, so to speak. Okay, so they needed to move their staff from one airport to another. Why did they need to move the staff? Because the FAA has very tight regulations in terms of how long a crew can be in the air over spans of time, whether it's over the course of a day or a 4-day period, whatever. They have very tight regulations on that. So movement of these flight crews becomes very important to them. And flight crews don't move in unison. You don't fly with the same people all the time. They vary that up for, I think, some intended and some unintended reasons. But they have to get this crew to, let's say this was going from Charlotte to Philadelphia, for lack of anything else. They needed to get them to Philadelphia because there's a plane that has to go to Milwaukee that these folks have to take. They have to be the ones that move that plane. So if they don't make it to Philadelphia, that flight to Milwaukee doesn't go. There are 150 people hoping to go to Milwaukee, which I don't know why 150 people would ever go to Milwaukee, but they're not making it there because the flight crew didn't make it. So you work back. Okay? We have to find some other way of moving our flight crews or making sure that gets handled. That becomes our functional problem that we have to address. So as you're looking at that, you move up this ladder a little bit. Give me a second to grab my note here to make sure I'm covering it the right way. And, here I am. The flight crew, was that the essential problem? The overbooking was the essential problem. So when you look at this from all vantage points, the pilot, I have to be able to get this to move because I've got to get this flight to Philadelphia. Okay, he has his responsibility. As soon as he gets away from the gate, it's his. He can't get away from the gate while it's overbooked. They have to take care of some things. When you look at the overbooking policy, okay, they've got to do something with that. So there's our fundamental problem to be addressed. But the police got called in. What were the police supposed to do? What was their job at that point in time? They were asked, without necessarily any background, to remove a passenger. They may have been told why. Anybody ever been bumped from a flight?
Usually not when I'm on the flight.
Right. Usually this happens before you get on. I witnessed it actually in Charlotte. I was making a connecting flight once, and there was this family, and they are prepared for this because this obviously happens. They overbook. It's standard operating procedure. And then when the flight is overbooked and they can't get off the ground, there is a computer program they run to decide which seats are not going to be filled. I was watching this family of 5, and their 12-year-old was the one that was picked out not to go. Well, he's in tears because his family's going to go, and he's of this belief that he's being left in Charlotte. So, being the good guy and not having any real deadline for me to get back, I went up and I traded tickets, and I said, look, put him in with me, and I'll take the next available flight out, which is kind of cool because it's the only time in my life I got to ride first class. If I'm going to ride first class, though, I want to go further than Charlotte to Philadelphia. But the issue here is that there's usually a procedure to keep this from happening on the flight. Do you think those police officers, when they got the call to go onto that flight, said, "Oh boy"? They said, no. They probably said something more vulgar than that, but I'm not going into that because I'm being recorded. But the fact is, they were not thrilled with having to do that. Then they get there and the gentleman doesn't want to leave. Obviously, he has reasons he doesn't want to leave. Their job is to remove him. They've been said, this is passenger X. He is to be removed. So they have to exercise force to take him off. And no matter what you want to say, there's no clean answer to this. So what does a leader have to do? Leader has to go out there and say, we were wrong. Even though we weren't really wrong. This is our standard operating procedure. We did everything by the book that we have written on this. But now we have to go and edit that book because this gave us very bad publicity. Everything, stock went down, tickets, sales, everything started to tank as a result. But when you're looking at it as a leader, okay, we've gotten down to the why. Moving staff seems to be our functional problem. So when we go into making a problem statement out of this, and a problem statement must be specific, it must be measurable, it must be objective, and it has to have a positive gain to it. SMOG, S-M-O-G. So if we're going to make a problem statement that's going to frame everything that we do related to this, what's it going to be? What do you have as a problem statement?
Well, I didn't think it was a statement, I just made points for the statement.
Okay, let's hear it.
I understand the basic issue here is manpower. It's moving people, staff. And if they have a problem getting back up to the next airport, maybe in their destinations, they can have people on the call that will come in. If they know if it's a 2-hour flight from, say, Charlotte to Philly, they know 3 hours ahead of time where the minute will be short. They can call people, and they can be there, so don't waste the time on moving people.
Okay.
Moving people there, and that would just throw it to fill those seats. And they can develop some type of an app, use on their phone. You can be on if you're on that flight.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there because where you're going. The problem statement is to frame the problem. What we too often do, and again, this is one that I think could be another episode in this. You want to identify the problem statement. What is the problem we're working on? What we all tend to do is jump over here to solutions. I know how we could have fixed this, and you're coming up with great ones. And they probably already have that on the table. But the fact is, we tend to go to the solution rather than framing the problem. So sometimes we end up chasing the wrong dog. Yes?
I think it came up as, how do you move staff without overbooking?
Okay, you are right on target, only you're using it as a how, but you're on target. You're capturing what I'm after. How about this team?
You kind of said, why is the staff,
Well, I kind of came
why is
to,
the staff causing an overbooking?
well, I'll come back to mine in a moment.
We also felt the problem that it needed a more flexible selection process for who gets bumped, rather.
Okay, and I would probably debate that with you because this is a tried and true method that we've been using for 22 years.
Obviously, it didn't work this time.
Right, exactly. Okay, so it does mean it needs something, but yes, you know, that would be probably the reflexive action on it. What did you folks have? Yeah.
Well, it kind of doesn't fit in just one sentence. We have an overall plane of staff that needs to move. One sees to be chosen at random to remove from the flight for the pilot to sit. The staff moves from point A to point B, and we will improve staff travel policies and arrangements.
Okay, you're in the direction. Again, if we ever do this again, we can work on problem statements, and that will take you down to the one sentence. But you're in the pool. You're just in the deep end right now. We want to get you down to the shallow end with fewer words. What did you folks come up with?
Due to overbooking and not allowing staff seating, reverse customer safety and loss loyalty.
Okay, you are on target. I'm just going to cut a couple of syllables out of it, but you're on target. You're all in the same ballpark here. How did we come up?
There were several issues with the processes and procedures, obviously, the overbooking started the ball rolling.
Okay.
Along with not catching it prior to getting on the flight. You know, and trying to resolve it at that point. And it just moved down the line from that point. There were so many different.
Cascading effect. What did we come up with in the back row?
How to reduce inconveniencing passengers when we need to move staff.
Okay, you're on target with what I'm after. You're capturing what everybody else is putting forward. Group in the far left.
The standard overbooking is causing bad publicity due to video feed.
You two are capturing it. I was very simplistic. United Air made moving staff a priority over service to clients, customer service, however you want to take it. That's what you want to get down to, because now that I've done this, I can start working on the problem. And again, that's another 2-hour episode that we're not going to be able to address now. But that, once you have a problem statement, whatever you're looking at, make sure you keep digging down so you get to the problem, the core of the problem, and not the symptoms of it. It's like somebody that has an allergy to, I'll say elm trees. You're allergic to elm trees. Your house has got 3 elm trees. Well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to chop down those 3 elm trees. It's going to be wonderful for when your person who's allergic to elm is home. But once they go out, we haven't solved the bigger issue. We really need medication to take care of that allergy when they're out somewhere else. You don't want to solve the wrong problem. And it's easy to do because we have a tendency to jump to solutions. As leaders, we think everybody wants us to solve the problem. They do. But the fact is, we have to solve the right problem. Otherwise, we end up with cascading effects. So what you folks came up with is right in the target of their problem is simply they're putting staff as a priority over their clients on individual flights. Now, they're going to go through a host of things that they have to do because right now they have to solve the issue of overbooked flights. You have to solve the issue of how do we move staff from one airport to another when we need to do that. Maybe we have to have better scheduling, something along those lines. They have to then go out and do the repair work on their reputation, both internally and externally. Then they have to go and demonstrate over a period of time that what they have done works. And there's no way of shortcutting that one. Okay, let me just give this a quick erase and get you toward the moving finale of this all, because it really is the essence of what we're trying to do. Okay, this is where we go. The 5 whys, as I mentioned, and then you get down to specific, measurable, objective, and what's gained. This is the part that I always like to address with people because it's so critical. And it goes back to that why. I really don't care what it is you do. There's one thing that you can do that will change everything. So when you start thinking about what you're facing in life, whether it be personal, professional, whatever, there is one thing that you can do that will make everything else you do easier or unnecessary. Easy one to go through. We all try and live on budgets. Some of us do it more successfully than others. Some of us do it unsuccessfully. Okay? If you were just to think about that for a second, you struggle with money. It's kind of a universalism. What's one thing I can do that would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And if you use the topic of money, there are 2 ways to approach that. I can either make more. If I make more money, then everything else is easier or maybe even unnecessary. Or I can cut back on what I spend. And if I can cut back on what I spend, that makes things easier or unnecessary. You have to be able to go to that one thing in an issue. However, don't let that show you, don't come away with, well, if I do that one thing, everything else is off the board. No, because that one thing probably encompasses a lot of different actions. Let's go to make more money. Okay, I want to make more money, and that's how I am going to make everything else easier or unnecessary. Well, how am I going to make more money? I don't have a printing press in my basement, and Fort Knox is locked on the weekends, so I have to get another job. Well, if I get another job, does that mean I'm going to necessarily make more money? No, I have to get another job that provides me with more money. Well, how do I get to that job that's going to give me more money? Well, I may be, like in my case, I needed to go to school to be able to get a degree that allowed me to be an administrator, that allowed me to move up the ranks, that allowed me to make more money, that allowed me to send my kids to college, everything else. Okay? I had to do one thing, but then it becomes sequential. So you have to have under that one thing all the elements that go toward it. Now, if you take the other side of it, I've got to spend less. Okay, well, instead of going out to dinner every Saturday night, maybe we're going to go out to dinner one Saturday night a month, maybe 2. Or I'm going to start going to Costco or one of the big box places to buy stuff, and I'm going to save some money there. Maybe I'm going to cut out something that I've been buying at Acme that I really don't need, or I don't really have to have. Maybe I will travel a little bit less and save some money. There are 2 different ways that you can go about it, but there are a whole host of steps along the way. So you're going to have to sit back and think, what is that one thing? And then visualize. Once I've done that one thing, once I identify it, how do I quantify it? Okay, I want to make more money. Well, I'm making $10 an hour now. I need to make $12 an hour. How am I going to move up to $12 an hour? Is that my target? Have I identified that? Is it something that I can quantify? And like for me, I had to plan it over time. I wanted to increase my income. I needed to do it by getting certificated and going back to college. So I knew it was an X number of years process in order to get qualified to move to that level. Establish checkpoints. I was in Pennsylvania at the time. There you had to go for your master's degree, and then you had to get 15 credits beyond that for a principal's certificate, and 15 credits beyond that for a superintendent's certificate, and then the doctorate. So I had all my checkpoints, and I knew that I wanted to get a doctorate because I someday wanted to be in charge of a school district. And the only way I was going to do that was to get a doctorate, even though you can get there without it, but you get there a lot faster with it. And then you reflect and frame. After all said and done, is this really what I wanted to be? Is this the pathway I wanted to follow? And you're the only one who can determine that. But again, there's one thing that you can do that changes everything. And you have to be the one that makes that determination. So, that's the one I should close on, but I don't. I always go one step too far. We all have very elaborate feedback instruments, evaluations. When you're working in a school district in particular, evaluation is a very long and cumbersome task now. It used to be pretty simple, but now I think it's worth an awful lot more, but it's, and I don't care which group you're in, organization. I look at police evaluations. They're probably the most arduous to do. They require a ride along for a night, a whole host of different training checkoffs and everything. There's a lot that goes into it. So when you're talking about just trying to be able to get feedback and evaluate a situation, assess where you are, whatever, what am I doing that I should keep doing? What's working? What am I feeling good about? What's the positive reaction I get from people when I do these kinds of things? Okay? I'll use myself as an example because I do this regularly. And one of the things, what am I doing that I should keep doing? I do a lot of outreach to the high schools in the county. Last week I did the award ceremony at Shalleck. I was at the award ceremony at the Votech. I was at the awards program at Salem. I will be at 4 of their graduations this coming week. Okay, that's something I should keep doing because as the president of the college, as the face of the college, and I always said they would have been better off with George Clooney's face than mine, but the fact is they got mine. So I need to keep doing that. That's important. What am I doing that I should stop doing? That's a tougher one to go to. I look at it and personally, what am I doing that I should stop doing? I have to stop taking on as many internal tasks as I do. Sometimes if you just don't do something, great story here. I was a principal and I had to turn in these reports every month on fire drills. And I looked at the guy that had done them before me and he always put fire drill June 8th at 10:05, and then there was a place over here for conditions. He said sunny and warm. Okay, so I spend my first few years sending in these fire drill reports, and I put the date, and I put the time, and how long it took to evacuate, and I was saying the weather conditions and so forth. I decided, is anybody really paying attention to this? It seemed rather perfunctory, so I go and I put the date, the time, the time it took us to evacuate the building, and then under conditions I put abnormal. 10 years, nobody said a thing. Nobody said a thing. So really, was that column necessary? Or were we misinterpreting it? Maybe it should have been conditions normal. Maybe it should have been conditions blocked stairway number 3, something along those lines. Then it would have had function. So there are things that we need to stop because there are things, if you don't do them tomorrow, nobody will ever notice. But we usually don't feel that confident in it. But try it. You'll find out. What am I not doing that I should be doing? For me, and I know this one sounds very self-serving, I need to take some time off. And they nodded in the back. Please take time off. Please get out of here. And that's been one of those things that I have not been good at doing over the years. I left Pennsville after 15 years. I had 17 weeks of unused vacation. That's ridiculous. I wasn't that valuable. Of course, you're allowed to say, yes, you were that valuable, but I wasn't that valuable that I had to be there every single day. I could have taken a few days off here and there, and it would have been all right. And for me, I need to do that. And then you go down to, what would I like to be doing? I'd like to be writing a book. I'd like to be out on my motorcycle. Okay? Can I incorporate those things into today? Well, I'm going to, because I'm going out to the Glass Center today. I'm going to stop and pick up my motorcycle on the way. I'm going to take that out to the Glass Center, and then I've got a meeting at the Votech. I'll take it there. And then at the end of the day, I might just ride around the county for a little while. So I will incorporate that, what I want to do, into what I need to do today. But this is a real quick and simple one that you can do for any situation. You need to do an evaluation on an employee, and you need them to look at it as well. Again, that's another episode for another day of this reflective piece. But you need to look at it for, what am I doing that I need to keep doing? What should I stop doing? What should I start doing? And then you need to convey that to them. But you also have to have that individual do it as well. It's very important that we get that reflective piece in there. And I'm going to, again, go overboard on this and get you out of here in a few minutes. Treatment of others. Respect. You earn respect. You can't command it. And people either respect you or they don't. It doesn't really matter. You just have to go and lead your life in a manner that you want people to respect. And if somebody is there and doesn't respect it, you're not going to change that. It's like love. You can't make somebody love you, and you can't make somebody stop loving you. It just happens. Respect is the same thing. Trust. Trust is not something that is acquired instantaneously, but it can be given instantaneously. I can trust Jen right here and now. Never met her before in my life, and I'm going to trust what she says to me is the truth. I have the opportunity to give that. I can't say she has to trust me. How many times do we use that line? Trust me, it'll be all right now. You know? The fact of the matter is that's earned over time. How is it earned? It's earned through consistency. It's earned through fidelity. It's earned through you understanding you. And then other people will come to trust. Value. Everybody in an organization has value. One of the things that I find very dichotomous here is that I am the president of the college. That carries with it a certain empowerment, uppityness, I'm going to say. And I try to say I'm no more important than that person who's cleaning the floors at night. Yes, do I have different responsibilities? Absolutely. But if they don't do a good job of cleaning those floors, students are going to come in the morning and it's going to be dingy or even dangerous in some cases. And we lose ground. So no matter how well I am doing over here, if I'm not doing it over here, it doesn't matter. I got this very clearly from a colonel because I was in Pemberton where we served Fort Dix and McGuire Air Force Base. There was a colonel that was commander of Fort Dix, and he was saying the toughest thing he had to do was make sure that that sentry that was out on Checkpoint Charlie in the hinterlands of the base took his job every bit as seriously as I took mine. Because if he faltered out there in that lonely outpost and let somebody cross because he was daydreaming or he was just frustrated and not paying attention, whatever, and somebody crossed, tragedy could ensue. So everybody's role is very important. That's why value has to be in there. And very few people equate value and salary. You do when you're not feeling valued. But the fact of the matter is you can make people feel very valued without a lot of money involved. One of the things I try and do here to make sure that happens, and you can all do it in whatever company you're in, everybody gets a birthday card. And they don't get a corporate birthday card. I'm revealing a trade secret here. They get one that I go to Donna's Hallmark in Woodstown. Again, it's a nice motorcycle ride. And I buy cards, and I give everybody a birthday card, and it's addressed from my home, and it's paid for by me, and I get the stamps at the Penns Grove post office and so forth. They might not know all that, but they know they got a card from the boss, and that makes people feel a little bit better. Okay? That's part of that value. We're all on a team. We're all in this together. If you can't convey that, all is lost. Okay? But that comes from all these other factors: respect, trust, value, a team, and then compassion. Everybody comes to work each day is coming with a whole set of issues that you know nothing about. When their feet hit the floor that morning, they didn't say, "How can I go in and give the boss a hard time today?" Well, a couple did. But most people start the day out with, "How can I make this a good one?" They're not looking for how to make it a bad day. They're looking for how to make it a good day. You have to be understanding that they're bringing a host of problems and issues with them to the job site. Once you understand that, you can demonstrate compassion. Again, I go back to the Rudy Giuliani book. He has a chapter in there that I found most moving, that weddings are optional, funerals are mandatory. And he was recounting what he went through on 9/11. And people don't remember that you didn't make a wedding as long as you sent the check. They will remember if you don't show up at a funeral to pay your respects. Ma Gorman still talks about how Bob Young didn't come to my father's funeral. Ma Gorman's 87. My father died in 84. You know, she's carrying that all this time, and I don't care when I call her, she says, "You know, Bob Young didn't come to your dad's funeral." I like that she's on that, because then she's off of me. So there's a diversion on it. But that is a very important thing, and that demonstrates compassion. Going to a funeral, sending a card for somebody who has lost a loved one, that gets you a lot of mileage. It shows your compassion for them and shows that they have compassion in their lives as well. So we go back to, you came out knowing your why. Hopefully you'll spend some time redefining that, distinguishing between leadership and management. If anything else that you come out with, leaders ask questions, managers answer questions. Seeing a universal business model, learning a framework for organizing meetings. Again, we can revisit that. Avoiding the ladders of inference. Cut it out. Keep it on your desk. Look at it when you're getting into a problem. Defining a problem statement, that would be one that we could do in the future, and identifying your one thing. So with that, I go back to questions, comments, criticisms, and/or complaints. Oh, there's got to be a complaint out there somewhere. I turn it over to you then.
Okay.
My work here is done.
Okay,
Thank you so much.